Good morning, gentlemen, and good morning to everyone at home, whether you're at home or in your class. We're going to talk about Dubbo, which is known as the hub of the West. The key question that you have for today, as we go through this presentation, is how does my suburb compare to Dubbo? When thinking about the name of your suburb, a lot of towns and cities and villages have Indigenous connections. For Dubbo, Dubbo means red earth. A lot of towns and places have British origins, such as Perth in Western Australia. There's also a Perth in the UK. Now for Dubbo, with its red earth, it's best displayed through a dust storm. And this was a dust storm on the 1st of January of 2019. Now, if you were to leave your windows open, as my mum did, back in the mid-90s, when we got home after a dust storm, an entire layer of the curtain was completely red. And that was just from the dust and the dirt that had been carried in this dust storm. Now, the reason why I've got a 40 sign up on the right-hand side of this slide is because I was out at athletics training as a teenager, and we had to go underneath cover and get out of the strong winds as this dust storm came over. The dust storm and the winds were that strong that a sign just like that 40 sign was bent over sideways. Now, a lot of this dust is collected not outside of Dubbo, but further afield in Central Australia. And Dubbo gets a lot of dust storms during droughts when there is not much rainfall and therefore not much vegetation. And as a result of that, there's lots of loose dust particles that then are picked up by strong winds and collected into dust storms like what you can see up on the slide. In terms of history, John Oxley was reported as one of the first Europeans to report on the area. And then the first major settler of the Dubbo area was a guy by the name of Robert Dulhunty. Robert had a suburb named after him, which was called Dulhunty, and that's where I grew up and lived until the age of 16. Spatial context. As you can see with the map on the left, Dubbo has connections to major cities on Australia's eastern seaboard. From Newcastle to Sydney, to Canberra, to Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide. We've got two pictures to the right of that map of New South Wales. The photo in the middle is a picture of the post office, the old post office in Macquarie Street, Dubbo. And the photo on the right is the old post office in Martin Place, here in Sydney. The reason why I've got those two photos is often it's between a town or city's post office that you measure distance between two places. As it says in the text below, Dubbo is 400 kilometres northwest of Sydney, has a population somewhere between 30 and 40,000. The city is 14th most populous place in New South Wales and 37th largest urban centre by population in Australia. In terms of connection, we've got two maps here. The map on the left with the dotted line around it is a Google map which highlights the distance and the time it would take to drive from Melbourne to Brisbane. If you wanted to go from Melbourne to Brisbane via Sydney, have a look at the map on the right. As you can see, both maps show that the time to travel between these two major state capitals would be around 18 to 19 hours. There is a 20-minute difference. If you go via Dubbo, it's going to be 20 minutes quicker, plus there's going to be less tolls if you go through Dubbo rather than going through Sydney. Now, if you look at the position of Dubbo, you can see that it sits roughly halfway between Melbourne and Brisbane. Now, a lot of trucks, as you can see in this picture here, use this road, which is the Newell Highway, and they drive between Brisbane and Melbourne 24/7, moving products between the two cities. These trucks use Dubbo as a hub. They use it as a distribution hub. So these trucks will often stop in Dubbo at warehouses And then surrounding Dubbo and even getting closer towards Sydney, smaller trucks will come in and pick up those goods and distribute them to the smaller villages, towns and cities. So Dubbo plays a key role in the distribution of goods, purely and simply as a result of its size, but also because of its position. Now, in summer, a lot of people leave Victoria and head up towards Queensland. And if they're going to do that, they drive through the interior of Australia rather than the coastline for the same reasons that we were mentioning before. As you can see, Dubbo is a good halfway spot to stop over for a night or two. Now, if you're thinking inside your head, if you've got a car full of kids and you're the parents in this situation, what could you possibly do if you stopped over in Dubbo for a night or two? I hope that this would be the answer. Western Plains Zoo. Opened in 1977. Western Plains Zoo it was the first open range zoo where you can ride a bike, hire a golf cart or drive around the zoo. Now, as you can see here in the bottom right map, you come in through the bottom here, and then you do a loop going clockwise, and as you go around, it's split up by continents. So first of all, when you come into this area, you're visiting Africa and the white rhino. And as you move around, you change in terms of the animals you get to see, and the last continent you see before coming out is Australia. So the Western Plains Zoo is strategically set up to catch a lot of visitors who are connecting between Melbourne and Brisbane. Not only that, a lot of people from Sydney also make trips out to this region of New South Wales and stop over at Western Plains Zoo. Put your hand up if you've been to Western Plains Zoo. Okay. What else can you do in Dubbo? Well as visiting the zoo, you could also go to the old Dubbo jail, which might take you an hour or two. This jail no longer is in operation, but now is a tourist destination. And the gallows that you can see there, they've been recreated, but that is where 8 men saw their final time on Earth in the late 1800s. Dubbo also sits on another connection highway, which is the Mitchell Highway, which connects Sydney with Adelaide. Now, if you look at the top map, 18 hours and 42 minutes if you wanted to drive from Sydney to Adelaide. But if you wanted to go the fastest way, you'd go a little bit further south, and as per the map below, you can see that you can save a good 4 hours. But if you choose to go through Dubbo, you might have reasons which lie out in this area where Cobar, Burke and Broken Hill reside. So Dubbo sits on the connection point between 4 state capital cities. It also has great connection in terms of air travel. And you can see there's a number of cities that you can connect to. Each week, there's around 200 flights in and out of Dubbo Airport. And you can fly with 2 major carriers, Qantas or Rex, which you can see in these 2 pictures here, are propeller-based aircraft which carry around 40 to 50 people. If you wish to travel out to Dubbo for something that's a little bit cheaper in terms of cost to get there, you might choose to go on CountryLink, which in the old days was called the XBT. And if you're on the train this morning or around Summer Hill or Ashfield Station around 20 past 7, you would have seen a train like this one go past. Getting on at Central at about 10 past 7, this train gets into Dubbo at about 1 o'clock, has a quick turnaround, and then half an hour later is coming back to Sydney and is back here by 9 p.m. Dubbo is the last stop for the XBT, now known as the CountryLink Explorer. So the orange line represents the train line, and for people who live further into outback New South Wales, there's connecting bus services, such as the bus that you can see in the photo on the right, which goes from Dubbo all the way out to Broken Hill as an example. So straight away, I hope, just through our talk about history and about connection, you're starting to think about, okay, what connection points does my suburb have? You may not have an airport, but you might have a highway that's running through your suburb. Do you have a train line? Do you have a train station? These could be examples of connection in your suburb. If you go onto your iPhone, you could download an app from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and you could type in your postcode. What I've got up on the left is Dubbo, and on the right I've put in Ashfield. Put your hand up if you live in Ashfield. Perfect. This is why we selected Ashfield. I'm trying to draw your attention to comparing both Ashfield and Dubbo, and I've put some stars here to help you. So we're looking for major points of difference. Now you can see at the top, Dubbo has a bigger population, but I've also drawn your attention to Australian citizens. And I've done a little calculation over on the right, because you can see there's more people in Dubbo. But I was interested in what was the percentage of Australian citizens. And as you can see, in Dubbo, it's 88%, and in Ashfield, it's 64%. So I'm wondering, when you come to look at your suburb, can you, 1, download the app, and 2, can you look for difference? Next bunch of stats here we've got median weekly family income. Not a huge difference, but I wonder if that difference can jump out. And if I just skip forward to a slide here, median weekly household income, the difference between Dubbo and Ashfield. If you times that by 52 weeks, we can see that it's a $15,000 difference. Coming back to looking at houses and dwellings. In Dubbo, there's just under 11,500 houses. And here's a picture of one next to Dubbo Golf Course. In Ashfield, and there's the city, and here's Ashfield, an Ashfield train station, you can see that there's a significant difference in the number of flats and units between Ashfield and Dubbo. And there's various reasons for that, which you'll explore, no doubt, with your teacher. But I wonder, in your suburb, are there more units or are there more houses? If we look at the prices for buying a house or unit, on the left here we have Dubbo, and it's slightly hard to see, but it goes from December 2016 to April 2018. And we can see that the median house price, so the middle house price on average, here is $360,000. On the right hand side over here, from 2018, the median price in Sydney is $815,000. So double the price. And we can compare it against other cities around Australia. And we can see that Dubbo is significantly less than most of those. Unemployment. When you're looking to research your suburb, can you look at unemployment, and can you find out any information for either your suburb or for your area? Having a look at the graph up on the screen, we've got a comparison between Dubbo, Orange and Bathurst. Now, if you were to drive from here to Dubbo, you would go over the Blue Mountains through Katoomba, then you'd go through Lithgow, then Bathurst, then Orange, then Dubbo. And in sporting matches, for whatever sport it is in the central west of New South Wales, the key competitors for Dubbo are Orange and Bathurst more times than not. Both of these comparison cities also have a similar population. But if we look at the unemployment rate, for Dubbo, which is in green, you can see that it's a lot better there than in Orange and Bathurst when we look at September 2017. So this key question that we need to keep coming back to, how does my suburb compare to Dubbo? Well, we can also look at shopping. Think about your suburb now. In your suburb, what major chains or shops do you have? Dubbo has 3 Woolworths, a Target, Harvey Norman, Officeworks, Big W, Myer, IGA, 3 Subways. And you can see through the list that there's a whole list of others that you would find either in your suburb or probably not too far away. They used to say that a sign of economics and prosperity in a town or city was whether you had a McDonald's or not. I wonder if you have a McDonald's in your suburb. Put your hand up if you do. Okay, hands down. Put your hand up if you have a Aldi, not the car, but the supermarket in your suburb. So some people commentate that Aldi is now the new indicator, which has surpassed McDonald's. Does your suburb have a main street? In Dubbo, this is the main street here, called Macquarie Street. You've got the Macquarie River that sits just behind it. It has a secondary main street, which runs perpendicular. In the 90s, they looked to make the main street look a lot better, so they reduced the width of the footpath. Oh, sorry, the opposite of that. They made the footpath wider. They took a few car parks out along the street and planted a whole bunch of trees. So does your suburb have a main street? Now, all of those places that I just mentioned here, they're not sitting on the main street, but a large number of them are sitting in this central business district of Dubbo. At the other end of town, so in East Dubbo, there's a shopping centre. Put your hand up if your suburb has a shopping centre. This shopping centre is called Aranamore Marketplace, and as the text says below, it was opened in 1979. And I'm born not too long after that, and over the course of my 16 years there, this continued to get bigger and bigger. Now there's a number of specialty shops in there, and you can see Big W and JB Hi-Fi, Woolworths, and also a Caltex petrol station are located there. Since I've left Dubbo, and in recent years, I've noticed a big change, which is just here. This used to be one level car park, but in the last 5 years, they've built a second story on that car park, which highlights that business must be going well in Dubbo. Otherwise, the investment in that car park would not be feasible. Education. A number of public and private schools, as you can see in the list there. There's also a number of tertiary institutions. During my teenage years, Charles Sturt came to Dubbo. The TAFE was always there and is a major skills builder for the area because construction is a large employment sector in Dubbo. So you have a number of tertiary institutions, but for 99% of the population, people are happy in Dubbo to send their kids to schools in Dubbo. There would be a small percentage that are going off to boarding school in Sydney, in Wollongong, and maybe Bathurst. So how many schools do you have in your suburb? How many public schools? How many Catholic schools? How many independent schools? Do you have a TAFE? Is there a university within your suburb or nearby? So education is another theme for you to look at in regards to comparison. We might pause there for a second. For the next 45 seconds, with the person next to you, so far, what are some similarities and differences between Dubbo and your suburb? Discuss that with the person next to you. Okay, so here's another theme now to write down. Medical. All good, sir? Yeah. So I'm wondering, in your suburb, do you have a medical centre? Do you have a hospital? Do you have a doctor's surgery? Do you have access to dentists? There's lots of ways you can look at medical, but in Dubbo, Dubbo has 3 hospitals. The major hospital is Dubbo Base Hospital, where Glenn McGrath was born, who you might have heard of. There's also a private hospital, which is what this picture is of here. And then there's a third smaller hospital, which is Lord's Hospital, and that largely looks after those who are aged. Now, the next slide here looks at another area of medical, which is the Royal Flying Doctor Service. You can see as the sun's setting, there's a plane sitting in front of the hangar here. And recently, they completed a new hangar where one of these ambulance type planes, which flies around outback New South Wales, can fly to Dubbo, land, and then taxi into the hangar, and therefore be undercover, away from rain if it is raining, or dust storms if there is one, and can then be a transfer point for ambulance to pick up the patient. So if we, and before we look at the map of New South Wales, who saw that the Royals came to Sydney and also to Dubbo towards the end of last year? Can anyone ID who these two people are? Yep. And she recently had a baby, so we've got Prince Harry there, and what they're doing is they are inspecting this Royal Flying Doctor Service here at Dubbo Airport. And for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, if you look at Dubbo, Dubbo is pretty much the last major city before you get into this outback section of New South Wales. Now you can see there's Broken Hill and there's Bourke. Cobar's not on the map, but there are a whole bunch of smaller towns. But there is a large section of New South Wales here where you have a number of families residing on farms, and where they have medical emergencies, or they may need to be transported for particular reasons, RE medical, then the Royal Flying Doctor Service comes to their rescue. In terms of employment, you saw before that there's a large retail section to Dubbo, but another major employer, and the biggest employer in Dubbo, is the Abattoir. And this was set up by a guy called Roger Fletcher. And in the early 2000s, they were killing approximately 2 million sheep per year. And you can see some examples of maybe something you'll be eating at lunchtime, or a smaller part of that. Now, to give you a sense of scale, this section here is where they clean all the wool that's come off the sheep's back. This is about the size of 4 football fields. And they take all the burr and all the grass out of the wool, and then they put it into 1 by 1 metre cubes, and then they send it to all continents of the world, except Antarctica. Roger Fletcher has his own train, and sometimes if you're ever around Sydenham Station, you might see this train go past as it heads towards Port Botany. What you see here is the early stages of the sheep being cut up. The sheep in the end does not exist as you see it now. Every single part of this sheep is used in some way. For example, some parts are packed into boxes that go to your supermarket. Some parts go into your Frankfurt that you might have at lunch. And some parts you might be getting out of the can that you're opening for your dog for dinner tonight. There is no waste. In this section just here, the skin of the sheep is dried out on a clothesline, and that goes into products such as handbags or Ugg boots or similar type products. Mr. May, do you think they'd be interested in knowing just the start of the process?
Yes, people love
that. The big semi-trailer type truck with a couple of levels backs up to the top left here of the cattle yard. All the sheep are put under cover. Then the sheep are funneled into this section just here, and they can only do it one at a time. But as the sheep comes in, it's electrocuted. A small zap. Then its throat is slit. Then after that, a guillotine comes down and cuts its head off. Yes, this is perfect, just in time for lunch, isn't it? The next machine grabs the skin around its neck and peels it off, making it look like something like that. You can imagine there's a fair bit of blood falling away here. So there are troughs either side of this machinery as this is happening. The sheep are then put into a freezer overnight, and then they come out the next day. They're on this system that moves them around where you have different people collecting different parts. And they have knives, super sharp, that if you just dropped a piece of paper over the top of them, they would split in half. So there's a whole process here to how the sheep starts in this section, then goes through all of these little parts, and then ends up on containers picked up by trucks that either take them to Sydney or take the containers down and put them on the train at Dubbo train station.
Where would they keep the living sheep?
The living sheep, so this would be the size maybe of TGS2. Okay, now the trucks usually are organised to turn up so that they can put them in here, and then not too long after, within 24 hours maybe, then they're facing the final outcome. Any other questions? Next thing, crime. Put your hand up if crime is an issue for you in your suburb. Maybe it's something that you've never thought about. Good, we've got a couple of hands here. As per this picture from Channel 7, Dubbo was in the top 18 crime suburbs. And therefore this place on the right, which is Dubbo Courthouse, can be quite busy. Mr. Ship shared a great website, which is here on the next slide. And you can see the website on the left there, where you can look at different types of crime. And as you can see from the legend at the top, the lighter the colour, the better. The darker the colour, the more crime. So I'm wondering if you can do some research into how the crime of Dubbo compares to your suburb. Let's look at recreational spaces now. Like most places, including just down the road in Marrickville, a lot of the recreational space is put near the river. Does anybody know why? Harry?
Oh, for like, so, if it like, you don't get much rain, like they can get all the water from the river. Okay,
so irrigation source potentially? There's a bigger reason why they would put recreation space near the river. Agriculture? Maybe?
People go swimming. Yeah.
Swimming? Last one.
Water sports, just like canoeing and stuff, really.
Yeah, all good reasons, but the biggest reason is if there is a flood, what would cost less to fix? A park or sports field, or a main street or residential properties? Main street. So if a flood goes through 100 shops, do you think that would be expensive to fix? So therefore, parkland, recreational space, is a management strategy for flooding. And you can see that along the Cooks River, where you've got Marrickville Golf Course and numerous different sporting fields. So for Dubbo, the main river cuts through here, as you can see. Here's the central business district. The main street is elevated up from this river. On this side, there's a steep incline as well. But in this space here, where you can see the sporting ovals, it's reasonably flat. And in times of flooding, these go underwater. Here's the main park called Victoria Park. This is where Prince Harry came and spoke to people of Dubbo. Here's the cenotaph, where this photo was taken on Anzac Day of this year. In terms of cinemas, there used to be only one cinema at the RSL Club, and during the 1990s, a new complex was built where there are now 6 cinemas. Most country towns would be happy to have 9 hole golf course. In Dubbo, they had 18, and then during the 90s, they extended that to 27. And this is a popular area of Dubbo now, with some big houses close to what is a championship golf course. Dubbo built a synthetic hockey pitch, which allows it to then have tournaments inviting people from different areas of New South Wales. And it's able to double up on the accommodation complexes, motels and hotels, and cabins and caravan parks that are also there for Taronga Zoo to catch those people who are travelling through and stopping over, or for those people who are coming out to Dubbo. This weekend, does anybody have Saturday off sport? No? What about Sunday? Okay, if you're interested, you could fly out to Dubbo for the Dubbo show. Yeah, so 24th, 25th and 26th of May. A popular event every year for people to do, particularly younger people in infant, child and teenage years. Apex Oval. Every year, City play against Country. I'm not sure if they still do this. They were doing it up until a couple of years ago. But this is Apex Oval, which they redeveloped. This is the ground just here. They built a new grandstand, and as a result of that, they were able to host this important rugby league match, which in the past had helped to select New South Wales rugby league teams. Dubbo has a race course, often holding big meets, has a Greyhound Track, has 7 turf cricket pitches. Every summer in the new year they hold an athletics meet, inviting people from all over the eastern seaboard. And in the last 5 to 10 years they built a tartan athletics track, which allowed it to host bigger and better carnivals. It also has an indoor basketball stadium, which also has a couple of indoor cricket pitches. It has a 50-metre pool, which when it was built was the second best pool in New South Wales after North Sydney Pool. There's an indoor pool at the RSL Club. This is the main Olympic-sized swimming pool, same place just here. This photo is taken from the top of the water slide. Some people like to use the river as their recreation, as someone was mentioning before. Dubbo has a 10-pin bowling centre, a BMX track, a go-kart raceway, and all of these things that we've mentioned today. Just wait here, go one moment. From recreation to medical to education have led Dubbo to be renowned as a sponge city. Put your hand up if you did the washing last night after dinner. Hands down. Okay. Dubbo is like this sponge. Geographers have compared Dubbo to this sponge. And what this diagram from Global Interactions highlights is that towns surrounding Dubbo have been losing people whilst Dubbo's population has been increasing. If you look at the blue statistic here, that is highlighting that Dubbo's population rose by 56.5% between 1976 and 1997. If you can compare the blue stats for all the little towns around Dubbo, you can see a lot of those are minus. So Dubbo, through its opportunities, medical, education, retail or other, has been draining people away from these little communities and making it bigger. And therefore, that's why Dubbo is renowned as a sponge city. To finish off, as the bell is about to go, the key question: how does your city, how does your suburb that you live in compare to Dubbo? The end. Thank you.